Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and today I'll be discussing the Reebok Nano X4 Adventure, talking about some first impressions that I have with the shoe, doing a little construction overview, and then talk about sizing of this model. So, 4 first impressions that I have with this shoe. Number 1, if you are investing with this shoe for training, you're going to want to consider how stiff this shoe is. So this is definitely one of the more built out nanos that I have ever tried. I'm still kind of on the fence if I even like them for working out and anything serious in the gym, because they're just very stiff and they're very tough to break in. There's a lot of layering going on, which is great from an outdoor context, but being that hybrid model for outdoor training and then indoor workouts, I'm not really sure this model is going to deliver for the indoor context for some individuals. And more specifically, if you train in warmer gyms or if you are in a CrossFit box and you want a shoe that feels a little bit more breathable and it's not going to get overly hot if you're wearing thicker socks or more athletic focused socks, this shoe may not be your best bet because this model is very thick and chunky, and I just honestly haven't loved them the most for anything where I'm getting up on the forefoot or anything that I need a little bit more articulation with my shoes. The second first impression that I have with this model is I do appreciate that they use the Vibram outsole material on this shoe. So the lugs of this shoe are pretty dang aggressive. They are very rigid. I don't think they're going to break down very quick. And they do feel a little bit more grippy than the prior models regarding their texture. Generally speaking, whenever you have the Vibram outsoles, you do get a bit more bite and grip. So that is a good thing with this shoe if you do want them for hiking, some light trail runs, or some outdoor sessions. I think that's going to be a good thing with this model long term. You also have that extended outsole wrap up here along the toe box to give you additional security. So that is a win with this shoe. The third first impression that I've noticed with this model is the upper construction feels a little bit restrictive. And now, on top of the shoe feeling very stiff, the upper can feel a little bit tough to break into, and that's because we have this Duragrip material around the toe box here, and then this slightly thicker upper. Now, this is good once again for protection from outdoors, but if you want a shoe that's going to give your foot a little bit more room, this model is not going to be it. This is not going to be the best Nano iteration for that. And so all that to say, if you need a Nano for primarily gym training, don't look into the Nano X4 Adventure in my opinion. It's just going to feel way too built out for your needs. And this upper takes a minute to break in. And there's not a lot of ventilation going on with this upper and all these overlays. And then also with this model, you've got a thicker boot back here, which is kind of nice from an outdoor context. I think that this padded boot should actually help keep out debris a little bit better than prior models. Now, I do wish the tongue was a tiny bit longer. I feel like it would feel a little bit more natural. It can feel a little bit low at times in my opinion, which kind of conflicts with the boot. Like you can see that the boot comes up a bit high and the tongue kind of sits lower, which is a little bit interesting. And I'm not really sure if I like this because with this tongue feeling a bit more low profile and with the stiffness of this shoe, I did notice that I had to kind of crank the shoe down, especially in the first couple of wears, to not feel like I was kind of slipping out of this boot. So I don't necessarily know how I feel about the boot in total. I like that it's padded from a debris protection standpoint, but I'm not sure if the stiffness and the material of the boot make a lot of sense in unison to promote security and prevent any form of heel slippage. So definitely keep that in mind. I think if you had slip issues in the X3 and X4, that is going to be way more prevalent in this model. So definitely think about that and potentially pass on the shoe if that was you. My fourth first impression with this shoe is I think where this model is going to excel the most is if you really like the novelty of the Adventure models or if you just collect Nanos, that's where the shoe makes a lot of sense. But from an overall performance standpoint, I don't necessarily love this shoe. The stack height is wicked high, and again, it just feels a bit too built out for a lot of my lifting needs. Even from a hypertrophy and more static strength context, I don't love the ground feel that you get with this shoe, and because it does feel so built and this foot is so aggressive, I noticed that this arch is really pushing into my midfoot, and so that is definitely something I'm going to talk about in my sizing section, but it was kind of off-putting in this shoe, and so again, this is not going to be, I think, your one foolproof Nano for everything. If you're a collector or if you like the novelty, it makes sense. But for somebody who doesn't have the means to buy a bunch of different shoes or just wants to buy a singular Nano model for everything, I would pass on the Nano X4 Adventure as well. And now when it comes to sizing in this shoe, this model feels pretty dang narrow. You have a pretty aggressive taper here, and with this thicker upper, you're not gonna have as much of an easy time to break this in. And so I have an E to double E with foot. and I find the shoe to fit a bit too tight for my needs, and I don't love how aggressive this arch is. So if you have a narrow and medium foot width and a relatively higher arch, or if you like arch support, you'll likely feel okay in the shoe. But if you have a flatter foot, if you have a foot width that is E+ width and you like a lot of toe box room, pass on the shoe. I don't think it's going to be the call, or you might want to go up a half size to give yourself a little bit more wiggle room. But again, narrow and medium feet, you should be safe going true to size in the shoe. If you do want a bit more wiggle room too, if you're like in that medium foot width and you want to play it safe, going up a half size could be the move. But my only hesitation there, and why I didn't suggest that out of the gate, is with how stiff this shoe is, you might run into heel slip issues if this model ends up running too long. So you're kind of in this weird place with sizing, and that's kind of how I feel with this shoe, where I'm like, should I go up? No, because then the heel slip will feel a little bit more pronounced, but it does feel too snug, so like I don't really know what to do. So I'm just kind of chalking it up that this shoe just doesn't align with my foot anatomy. And if you're similar in that regard, you're likely not going to love the fit of this shoe. But if you have additional sizing and fit questions, drop them down below and I'll try to answer what you got. All right, so now let's do the construction overview of the Nano X4 Adventure. Now I will say, I do really like the attention to detail with this shoe regarding the materials. I just think there are a couple conflicting construction specs with this shoe, which kind of make it not as strong as it could be. But looking at the midsole of this model, you have that float ride energy foam that runs throughout that's been consistent with the Nano X3, X4, X1, X2, etc. And then you also have that lift and run chassis system that rivals what the Nano X4 has. So it's this more low profile TPU that wraps. It doesn't come up like the Nano X3s did in that iteration. Looking at the upper of this shoe, you have a Duragrip material here around the toe box. This wraps the entirety of the toe. Now what I will say is, because when you have TPU layers here on the forefoot, there is some pressing in this shoe as well. So you are gonna have to break that in if you do invest in this model. Keep that in mind. And if you are prone to having issues with toe break in shoes, you might want to pass on this, because I don't know if that's necessarily going to break in enough for you, because the width of this toe box isn't the best. You also have this layered textile material here on the forefoot that goes into the midfoot, and then back here in the boot you have a similar structure as well. You do have a nice boot cup in the shoe, and you do have this CORDURA textile layering that runs throughout. Once again, looking at the boot, you have this padded material, which I like for debris again, but I don't know, it just doesn't feel like it has the best security with this tongue and the stiffness of the shoe. Looking at the tongue and the midfoot, you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eyelets that go up, with the 7th back there for lace lock. You have 2 additional loops here on the tongue. The tongue is gusseted and it's a padded mesh, so it's a bit more low profile with its build. Looking at the outsole, you have the Vibram outsole in this shoe. It is very grippy. I love this feature of this model, and the lugs are pretty aggressive as well. And then you do have a removable insole in this shoe if you need to swap that insole out. But if you have additional questions on this model, drop a comment down below. All right, y'all, that is my first impressions and construction overview video of the Reebok Nano X4 Adventure. This is definitely one of the more novel nanos out there. Is it gonna be the model for everybody? I don't think so. It's definitely not the strongest shoe in the gym. And when it comes to trail running and whatnot, if that is your main thing, you might want to go with something that's a bit more specific. I think the novelty of the shoe will be a little bit more limited with its scope with this iteration and the construction of this iteration for that hybrid type person. But if you have additional questions on the Nano X4 Adventure, drop a comment down below or hit me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I will see you guys in the next one.